So till now we have covered the structures in the anterior abdominal wall and we have entered into the peritoneal cavity. So right now my hand is in the peritoneal cavity and the layer which is lining the anterior abdominal wall from behind is the parietal layer of peritoneum, and the one which is covering the viscera is the visceral peritoneum. So the peritoneum is basically has two layers, the visceral peritoneum which is covering the organs, and the other the parietal peritoneum which is lining the anterior abdominal wall and the posterior abdominal wall. So this is the general arrangement of peritoneum. Now developmentally, as I already told you, that the peritoneum has a ventral mesentery and a dorsal mesentery. The ventral mesentery is resorbed in most of its part but remains in the ventral as ventral mesentery at the level of stomach, known as ventral mesogastrium. So there are certain peritoneal reflections which are derived from the ventral mesogastrium, and those are known as ligaments or omentum or mesentery. So first of all, we will trace the peritoneum, the parietal peritoneum, from the anterior abdominal wall to the liver. So if you see carefully, this is the anterior abdominal wall, this is the level of umbilicus, and this is the parietal layer of peritoneum. So this parietal layer of peritoneum just right to the midline at the level of umbilicus, the two layers of parietal peritoneum from the right and from the left side, they form a fold. This is that double layered fold which is known as falciform ligament. So this is the falciform ligament. You can see that it is, the one end is connected to the anterior abdominal wall and the other is attached onto the liver, and there is this crescent shaped margin which is the free margin of the falciform ligament, and if you feel it, you can feel a ligament, a round ligament in this free margin. This is the round ligament or the ligamentum teres hepatis. Okay, so now we will trace the peritoneum from the anterior abdominal wall to the liver. So this is the falciform ligament. If I put my fingers inside and I trace this ligament, my fingers are going till this level. Okay, so this is the left layer of the falciform ligament and this is the right layer of the falciform ligament. This left layer of the falciform ligament is covering the left surface of the liver. It is also covering the superior surface of the liver, and when I put my fingers deep, I cannot pass my fingers further deep because the peritoneum is reflecting from the liver onto the undersurface of diaphragm. This is the diaphragm and this is the undersurface of diaphragm, and you can see this parietal layer continuing over the inferior surface of diaphragm, and this is the level of continuation on the left side. Okay, so this reflection of peritoneum from the liver onto the undersurface of diaphragm is the anterior layer of left triangular ligament. Similarly, on the right side, to see the right side, so this is the right lobe of liver. The falciform ligament is dividing this liver into a smaller left lobe and a larger right lobe. So now I am going to trace the right layer of the falciform ligament. So I am sliding my fingers between the parietal layer which is covering the anterior abdominal wall and the visceral layer which is adherent to the viscera, the liver. So I am putting my finger deep and my fingers are going till this level. Okay, so the place where my fingers are going till the level it is again reflecting. See, you can see my fingers. So my fingers are going till this level. At this level, the peritoneum is again reflecting from the liver onto the diaphragm, under surface of diaphragm, forming the superior layer of the coronary ligament. Okay, so at this level, the peritoneum is forming a fold which is known as the superior layer of the right triangular ligament, and on the left side, this reflection is known as the anterior layer of the left triangular ligament. Okay, and this space which is created between the diaphragm and the left lobe of liver, between the diaphragm and the right lobe of liver, is known as right and left subphrenic spaces. Okay, so right and left subphrenic spaces. So till now we have traced the peritoneum from the anterior abdominal wall to the liver, forming the anterior layer of the left triangular ligament and superior layer of the right triangular ligament. Now we will also see the other ligaments and omentum and mesenteries. What are those? So this, as you can see, this patch of peritoneum or this fold of peritoneum which is loaded with fat. You can see the fat. So this fold of peritoneum is attached to the greater curvature of the stomach. This is stomach, this is liver, this is the stomach. If I lift this, so you can see this is the stomach. Okay, this is the lesser curvature of stomach and this is the greater curvature of stomach. There is a double layered fold of peritoneum along the lesser curvature which is known as lesser omentum. Then there is another fold of this greater omentum is a 4-layered fold of peritoneum. This is known as greater omentum. Okay. Oh. So this greater omentum normally covers the whole of the abdomen. Suppose if there is any injury, so macrophages present in this greater omentum, they move towards that part and the this omentum adheres to that area. Okay, so this acts as a policeman of the abdomen. So this is also known as policeman of the abdomen. If I lift this greater omentum, you can see transverse colon behind the greater omentum. Okay, and this double layered fold of peritoneum which is connecting the transverse colon to the posterior abdominal wall. Okay, it is attached to the posterior abdominal wall. So this double layered fold of peritoneum is the transverse mesocolon. Okay, and this 4-layered fold of peritoneum is the greater omentum. So normally to study the reflection of peritoneum in the abdomen, we divide the abdomen into a supracholic compartment taking the transverse mesocolon, attachment of transverse mesocolon as a reference point, into a supracholic compartment and a infracholic compartment. Okay. Also, we study the peritoneum into 2 parts, a vertical disposition and a horizontal disposition. Okay, so I have lifted the greater omentum, the transverse colon and the transverse mesocolon. After lifting these structures, you can see loops of intestine. This is the small intestine. These are loops of small intestine. Upper and towards the left, these are the loops of jejunum. Central and towards the right or inferior is these are the loops of ileum. Okay, so jejunum and ileum. I will now try to lift these loops. See, I have lifted these loops of intestine and you can see that these loops of small intestine are attached to the posterior abdominal wall through mesentery. This is the mesentery of small intestine and this mesentery of small intestine connects the small intestines to the posterior abdominal wall. So the attachment is fixed to the posterior abdominal wall. The loops are freely mobile inside the abdominal cavity. Okay, so these are the loops of small intestine. Left to the small intestine, see, if I see the continuity, this was the transverse colon, and if I trace the transverse colon, this place where the transverse colon is taking a turn is the left colic flexure, because this is in contact with the spleen, so this is also known as splenic flexure. Okay, so it is easy to understand why it is called splenic flexure, because it is in contact with the spleen. Here the transverse colon will now take a turn towards the left, and it will now continue as the descending colon. So this is descending colon. Now this descending colon will continue as the sigmoid colon. Okay, sigmoid colon, this loop is the sigmoid colon. Again, the descending and ascending colon are secondarily retroperitoneal part of the intestine, but sigmoid colon has its own mesentery. Okay, so sigmoid colon again has its mesentery. So this part is sigmoid colon, and then now at this level, this is the level of pelvic brim, and we have now entered into the pelvic cavity. So the peritoneum is continuous from the abdominal cavity to the pelvic cavity. See this organ, the anterior-most structure in the pelvic cavity. This is the urinary bladder. Okay, and it is covered with peritoneum. This is the peritoneum covering the superior surface of the urinary bladder. Because this body is male, so what you will see? You will see rectum behind the urinary bladder. So this part, the part which I am tracing is the rectum. Okay, so now this peritoneum is reflecting from the superior surface of the bladder to some part of the posterior surface of bladder, then to the rectum. So the space created because of this reflection of peritoneum from the urinary bladder to the rectum is known as vesico-rectal pouch या फिर rectovesical pouch. Okay, so this is rectovesical pouch. So in males there is only one pouch known as rectovesical pouch. Clear? And then this peritoneum is continuous over the lateral pelvic wall. We will discuss the reflection of peritoneum in the pelvis separately. Okay, so now we'll see the other parts of intestine. See, this is the small intestine, and I told you the central end part towards the right side is the ileum. Now this ileum is continuous at ileocecal junction. See, this is ileocecal junction. Okay, this part is quite dilated, this part is cecum. This is the starting point of the large intestine. This is blind from the inferior aspect. Okay, so this blind pouch is the cecum, and then it continues as ascending colon. You can also notice a appendix. See this small tubular structure. This small tubular structure, you can trace it from here. See this is the appendix. It also has its own mesentery. This yellow part is the mesentery of appendix, known as mesoappendix. Okay, so now see this is appendix, this is cecum, and this part is ascending colon. If I trace the ascending colon, it is going till here, and here it is taking a turn in relation to liver. Okay, see, so this is transverse colon. Okay, and the turn is here, and it is in relation to liver. This is the right lobe of liver, this is the inferior surface of liver. Most of the viscera are related to the inferior surface of liver. That is why the inferior surface of liver is also known as the visceral surface of liver. Okay, so because this turn from the ascending colon to the transverse colon is related to the undersurface or the inferior surface of liver, so this turn is also known as hepatic flexure of the colon. Okay. Similarly, the left turn is known as splenic flexure. Likewise, the right turn is known as hepatic flexure because it is related to the liver. Okay, so we have traced the small intestine as well as the large intestine, and we have traced this derivative, the falciform ligament, the anterior layer of left triangular ligament, and the superior layer of the right coronary ligament in the ventral mesentery.